Let's go to the first paragraph on page 64. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. Now, he is immediately going to jump into business. And here's his first comparison between a business inventory and a personal inventory. He assumes that we know something about a business inventory. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. And I think we could probably all agree with that. If you had a store selling ladies' purses, men's watches, bicycles, or whatever, if you didn't go in there and inventory once in a while, you would have no idea how you stand. You wouldn't know what's been sold out of that store, and you need to order new items to replace that. You wouldn't know what's been stolen that you didn't get paid for. If you didn't inventory once in a while, you wouldn't know what's become damaged and unsaleable. Nobody wants to buy it, and it's sitting in your store, taking up valuable shelf space and floor space. Probably paying interest on borrowed money to buy it in the first place. If you didn't inventory once in a while, you wouldn't know what's become out of style. And nobody particularly wants to buy it, but you need to put it on sale and get rid of it and get it out of that store. Because it's costing you money every day you keep it in there. I think we could all agree that a business which takes no regular inventory will usually go broke. Now he says, taking a commercial inventory. And immediately he used a different word. Instead of business, he's going to call it commercial. So his first comparison is this. Whether we're taking a business inventory, a commercial inventory, or a personal inventory. Without the inventory, we're probably going to go broke. You know, you and I have got one of the most important personal businesses in the world today. And that's the business of finding a way to live, where we can have a little peace of mind, serenity, and happiness, and not have to go back to drinking. And if we don't inventory in our personal business, we're probably going to go broke too, just like a commercial inventory would. And for us, simply going broke is to go back to drinking again. So that's the first comparison. Whether we're taking a business inventory or a personal inventory, we're probably going to go broke without it. Now we're going to take a few key words out of the big book. We're going to put them up here on the screen. And we're going to see if we can't see just how simple this thing really is. Joe's putting a picture up there, and it's called a Step 4 Inventory Comparison. And we're going to be comparing the business inventory to the personal inventory. On the left-hand side of the sheet, we have business. Now listen to him. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding, and we're putting fact-finding under business inventory, and a fact-facing process, and we're putting fact-facing under inventory. It is an effort to discover the truth, and we're putting truth under the business inventory about the stock in trade. Now, the stock in trade is what's in that store for sale. Ladies' purses, men's watches, bicycles, or whatever. And we're putting stock in trade under business inventory. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods. And we're putting disclosed damaged or unsaleable goods under the business inventory. And to get rid of them promptly and without regret. And we're putting get rid of them promptly and without regret under the business inventory. In other words, we're going to go in that store. And we're going to try to find the facts. When we find them, we're going to try to face the facts. We're trying to discover the truth about the stock in trade. And what we're looking for is the damaged or unsaleable goods. The good items do not cause us to go broke. They sell over and over and over and over again. The damaged and unsaleable goods is what's sitting in there and taking up the floor space, the shelf space, paying interest on borrowed money. That's what's going to cause us to go broke. When we find them, we're going to get rid of them promptly and without regret. Now, if the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. In other words, he's going to have to honestly, truthfully look at these things. And once in a while, he'll try to fool himself. He may say, well, the reason these ladies aren't buying these purses is they just don't really know what they need to have. You know, he hates to admit that he made a mistake and put them in there in the first place. And he may hold on to them much longer than he should. And every day he does, it's going to cost him more and more and more and more money. So he's going to have to be truthful about it. Now, is there anybody in here that would have any problems with the statement Bill Wilson just made about taking a business inventory? We're going to try to find the facts. We're going to face the facts. We're looking for the truth about the stock in trade. We're looking for damaged and unsaleable goods. When we find them, we're going to get rid of them promptly and without regret. And as soon as they're gone, then new items can be put in their place. But new items can't be put in until the old damaged stuff is taken out and done away with. Anybody got any problem with that? Now watch him. He wrote a step for us. He used a series of words, which means exactly the same thing as the words that he used for the business inventory. He said we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways as what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. So under the personal inventory, we're going to take the words out of step 4 and compare them to the words that he used at the business inventory. He said we made a searching. And we're putting searching straight across from fact-finding. They mean the same thing. To find the facts, to search out the facts. We made a searching and fearless. And we're putting fearless straight across from fact-facing. To fearlessly look at those things. To face the facts as they really are. We made a searching and fearless moral. And there's where we got in trouble. We said, oh crap, there it is. There's that list of dirty, filthy, nasty things. And we don't want to look at them, and we sure as hell don't want to share them with somebody else later on. I'm not exactly sure what all Bill Wilson knew. But I know one thing, this guy understood the English language. And I really believe if he'd wanted you and I to make a list of dirty, filthy, nasty things, I think he would have said we made a searching and fearless amoral or searching and fearless immoral inventory. He didn't say that. He said moral. Bugged us and bugged us and bugged us and bugged us. Till finally one day we went back to the dictionary. And do you know what moral is defined as? Nothing in the world but truth. Things as they really are. The right and wrong of any given situation. So moral and truth mean exactly the same thing. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of what? Of ourselves. We're the only stock in trade that we have in this business of staying sober. Nobody else can make us sober. Nobody else can make us drink. Now, I'll agree they can make us thirsty as hell once in a while. But they can't make us drink. We decide whether we drink or not. Now, what part of ourself decides whether we drink or not? Is it our body or is it our mind? The real problem of the alcoholic sinner in his mind. Tell him he can drink rather than a body that ensures that he can't. So as I make this searching and fearless moral inventory of myself, I'm going to look into my mind, and I'm going to find those flawed thinking processes, which are the damaged and unsaleable goods in my inventory, and when I find them, I'm going to try to get rid of them promptly and without regret. And as long as those flawed thinking processes are in my mind, then God's thinking is blocked out. It's only when I find those things and do something about their removal that the good items, God's thinking, can take their place in my mind. There are three common manifestations of a selfish, self-centered human being. And we've already talked about them before when we talked about the basic instincts of life. Selfish, self-centered human beings who are operating on self-will are always filled with resentments. Always madder than hell. And damn him and damn them, and I'll show them, and they're not going to treat me that way, and I'll get even with SOB, and blah, 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 blah. God can't enter that part of our mind. The resentments have very effectively got him blocked out. A selfish, self-centered human being is always scared to death. Can't depend on God, can't depend on others, can't depend on ourselves any longer. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we know when it gets here it'll not be worth a damn, whatever it is. Always scared to death. God can't enter that part of the mind. The fears have very effectively blocked him out. Selfish, self-centered human beings always harming other human beings because of the basic instincts of life and overdoing in those areas. And then we're filled with shame and fear and guilt and remorse associated with those things that we've done to other human beings. God can't enter that part of our mind. The guilt and remorse has very effectively got him blocked out. Now, I like to look at my head up here as a little bitty store. Not much. A little Quick Trip, a little 7-Eleven, or come and get it and get and go, or whatever you want to call it. And in my store up here, over on this side, I've got some display cases. They are filled with resentments. Damn him and damn her, and by God I'll show them, and blah, 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 blah. Those cases are already full with the damaged and unsaleable goods called resentment. God can't direct my thinking because those resentments are directing my thinking. Whoever and whatever I'm resenting are controlling my thinking through my resentments toward them. Over here in this part of my store, I've got a little file cabinet. It's filled with fear. Oh, my God. What's she going to do when she finds out about it this time? Oh, my God. What's the boss going to say when he finds out what I've been doing? Oh, my God. What's the banker going to say when that next check gets in there? He's already told me he'd file on me next time. Oh, my God. Is that my car sitting out in the front and the front end's torn up and I don't remember? Oh, my God, and on and on and on. That file cabinet is already full. God can't get in there. Those fears very effectively block him out. Whatever I'm fearing is controlling my thinking, and God can't. Back here in the back of my store, I've got a storeroom, and it's filled with guilt and remorse associated with the people I've hurt in the past. We're not drunken bums. The guilt and remorse just literally eats us up. God can't get in that storeroom. The things that we're guilty about and remorseful about, they are controlling our thinking, and if they do, God can't. And it's just that simple. Now, my book is going to show me a way to look at these three common manifestations of self truthfully and honestly for the first time in my life. It's going to show me not only how to look at them, it's going to show me what caused them in the beginning. It's going to show me how to get rid of them and get them out of my head. And when resentments are gone and fears are gone and guilt and remorse is gone, then God's thinking can begin to take their place. But until I do something about this, God can't do it. You know, He gave us self-will. And He told us, He said, I love you enough that I'll let you live on self-will if that's what you want to do until you destroy yourself. He said, I'll never take it away from you. You will have to freely give it back to me if you want me to direct your will. And I can't give it back until I clean it up. Till I find the things that block me from giving it back, God cannot direct my thinking. Listen to what the book says. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. We've been not only mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. When a spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Now, this should lay to rest forever the idea of whether you're going to take a written inventory or a mental inventory. If you're going to set them on paper, you're going to have a piece of paper. You're going to have a pencil, a pen, a paintbrush, or something to write them down. So it should lay to rest the argument about whether it's going to be mental or whether it's going to be an actual written inventory. And by the way, inventory in the dictionary is defined as a written list of items. Not a mental list, but a written list. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to honestly, truthfully, try to look at our resentments. And sometimes we get confused about the word resentment. We really don't understand what he's talking about. And the word resentment itself comes from two old words. When you see R-E in front of another word, it always means to do again, to replay, to repaint, to redo. It always means to do again. The word sentiment comes from an old word called sentire, which means to feel. So the word resentment itself means to re-feel or to feel over again. Now let's say we're going through life and somebody comes along and they do something to us. Something to threaten my social instinct. They threaten my relationship with another human being. They threaten my self-esteem. They threaten my place in society. Or maybe they do something that threatens my security. Maybe they rip my money off from me. Or maybe they do something to threaten my sex life. Now, when they do that to me, that's not a resentment. That's a wrong on their part for doing so. It does not become a resentment until I go off in another room, or I go home and sit down in my easy chair and I replay that thing in my mind. Now, they did it to me the first time and it hurt when they did it to me. But now the second time, they're not even here. They're clear over across town now. And I sit there and I replay that thing in my mind, and I feel the pain the second time. And blame it on them for doing so. And then after a while I replay it again. And I feel the pain the third time. And I find that I'm always not too always honest with me. Because what I do is when I replay that resentment the second time and the third time and the fourth time, I seem to distort the picture just a little bit. I seem to make what they did just a little bit worse. I seem to make the part I played in it just a little bit less. And I seem to make the pain just a little bit deeper every time I do it. And let me play it over in my head long enough, I can distort the picture to the point where I can say, well, hell, I was just standing there doing nothing. And they come along and did it to me, and it's all their damn fault. You know, resentment is kind of like a football game. I hear you people down here in Florida have a pretty good football team. You run into Oklahoma once in a while, too. They got a pretty good football team. And they got this football game going out here, and the quarterback throws a pass, and the receiver out there, he has to jump up in the air to catch it. Do it that way a lot of times on purpose so the other team can't catch the ball. But the opposing team has learned the time to hit him is while he's still up in the air, and he's got his arms stretched out, and as soon as that ball touches his hands, it's okay to hit him. And they hit him, and he's about 3 feet off the ground. And they turn him upside down, and he falls on his head. His arm goes one way, and his leg goes another way. And he's laying on the ground, and he's hurt. And you can tell that he's hurt. But the football game is like the game of life. You're not going to stop it. That guy's laying on the ground hurt, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to run out there and they're going to check him out, and if he isn't hurt too bad, they'll pump a little air in him, and he'll get up and start playing, and the game starts over. If he's hurt too bad, they drag him off to the side, put somebody in his place, and the game goes on. Now the announcer up in the booth, he's got a resentment machine up there. Because after a while he says, let's look at that again. And this time it is in living color and slow motion. And my God, it looks twice as bad as it did the first time. You can really see the expression of pain on his face, how far his arm bent, how far that, looks twice as bad as it did the first time. And after a while the announcer will say, let's look at that again. Now 15 minutes has gone by and the game's been going on, and the announcer's sitting over here bouncing this guy up and down, up and down, up and down off the ground. Now we alcoholics have in our minds a little resentment replay machine. And we get up in the morning and the first thing we do is we clean the lens on it. Because we don't want to be sure we don't miss anything that day. The second thing we do is we tune her up in living color so we'll get a pure picture of it. We leave the house and we shine it on the world all day long. And we record all those things they do to us that day that's bad. And go home and sit down in the evening, play it over in our mind, make ourselves sick, and blame it on others for doing so. Now there's some days, though, we alcoholics have a bad day. We've got our resentment replay machine, the lens cleaned, tuned up in color, we're shining it on the world, and they won't do anything bad to us that day. Oh, that's a bad day for an alcoholic. We don't have anything to record. You know what we do then? By God, we record what they're thinking. That's what we do. We'll take that home and play it over in our head and make ourselves sick. Is there any way God could enter a mind filled with that kind of crap? There's a bad thing about a resentment. If you throw it out there long enough, after a while it's going to turn right around and come right back at you. And when it comes back at you, it comes back as self-resentment. And we begin to resent ourselves for being in a position to let those people do those things to us. And we alcoholics can't stand self-resentment. So after a while that turns into self-pity. And that's the sickest a human being can have, is to be filled with self-pity. And we alcoholics love it. My God, we get up in the morning and we put it on as a cloak of dignity. And we start out the door and we say, here we come, mean old world, just do it to me. I know you're going to get me again today. There's no way God can enter a mind filled with that kind of crap. Now just think. If I could get rid of those resentments, then they don't direct my thinking anymore. And then God can. But as long as those resentments are in my mind, then whatever I resent, whoever I resent, they are controlling the way I think, and God can't. And it's just that simple. It blows my mind every time I look at this thing, when I really begin to see the simplicity of how we do this step forward, Joe.
You know, if you don't think that we alcoholics love self-pity, just try to feel sorry for one of us. Say, oh, I feel sorry for you. You say, oh, damn it, don't you feel sorry for me? I'll do that myself. That's my job. Yeah, don't you do it, see. I love this inventory process that we're talking about. And it says, from it, the resentment's the number one offender. From it, the resentment, stem all forms of spiritual disease. So we've not only been mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady, the word malady means illness. He don't like to use the same word over and over again, so he calls it a malady this time instead of a disease.
Or an illness.
Or an illness. When the spiritual illness is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Not only are we spiritually ill, not only with our relationship with God, our own internal moral fiber is ill from bad thinking, you see. And that's what we're going to look at in here. And I'm with Charlie. We're not going to psychoanalyze ourselves. We're not going to say that the reason we are like this is because Mommy set us on the potty chair backwards. We're simply going to do what the book says. We're going to find the facts. We're going to face the facts. We engage in a process to accept the facts. And remember, Roland was told by Dr. Jung that ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which are the guiding force of the lives of these people, are suddenly cast to one side. We're looking for ideas, emotions, and attitudes that were the guiding force of our lives, because it's those things that made us sick, you see.
Now, one of the greatest problems we've had in this inventory is the example on page 65 is already filled out. And we didn't know the procedure that Bill used to fill it out. So what we've done is we've given you an inventory sheet called a review of resentments.
See, we're taught to read from left to right. And if you begin this inventory process and not understanding how it is, you go back to what you were trained to do, which is to work from left to right. And if we did that here on page 65, I would look at the first column and say, I'm resentful at, and I'd put down there Mr. Brown. I'd change my thoughts in my mind, and I'd go to the second column and write down the cause. Then the next third column, what part of self is affected. I didn't know anything about what self was, so I just disregarded that. Move back to the next first column and do it again. You don't have to do that but 2 or 3 or 4 times, and pretty soon your mind just goes tilt. It's just too much. So we just throw this away and say, oh, heck, they wanted all my life story anyhow, and just forget it. But the instructions on how to fill these out are right here on this page.
Okay, now the inventory sheet that you've got has 5 columns in it. We would ask you now, if you can, to fold under the last 2 columns where you can't see them. When you do, you'll have 3 blank columns. And we want to stress now, emphasize, we're not trying to bring another inventory into AA. We've got enough of those already. Your first 3 columns will be page 65 in the blank form. Column 1 says I'm resentful at. Column 2 says the cause. And column 3 says affects my. Now let's see if we can't see the instructions on how to fill these 3 columns out. He said in dealing with resentments, we're back now on the bottom of page 64. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Okay, we've got our paper and our pencil. The first instruction is this. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. Period. Let's stop right there. Let's go to column 1. And while our mind is on one thing and one thing only, let's list all the people we're angry with, all the institutions we're angry with, and all the principles we're angry with. People, that's self-explanatory. Institutions are such things as the police department, the Internal Revenue Service, the church, the post office, all those institutions that we get upset with during our drinking careers. Principles are the old guiding, I hate to use the word laws, but I can't think of anything any better. There's old guiding spiritual laws that interfered with our style of living. 10 Commandments are a set of principles. And when I'm out there drinking, I don't want to hear nothing about the 10 Commandments. Hell, I'm breaking every one of them except one, and could have broken it too when I was drunk. I don't know. Another old principle I always hated is what goes up must come down. Another one I hated says there are no free rides. Another one says you'll pay for whatever you receive. And one that my dad used on me as a kid, and I hated it then, and I don't like it today. He said, son, if you lay down with dogs, you'll get fleas on you every time. You know, those old ideas that interfered with our style of living. I've never known an alcoholic yet who did not know just exactly who and what, by God, they're mad at. Hell, we spend thousands of hours sitting around in bars talking about it. And all we got to do for column 1 is take it out of our head, list it on this sheet of paper, going from top to bottom.
Rather than left and right, top to bottom. This way.
Now, if you're anything like I am, you're going to be amazed before you fill out completely column 1. They came to me and said, make a list of your resentments, and I said, oh, I don't have any. And they said, oh, surely you got 1 or 2. And let us explain to you what that word means. And they explained that it was to refill old anger, old hurts, and old pains. And I said, oh, yeah, I got a couple of those. They said, well, put them down on this sheet of paper. I started on column 1, leaving space in between the names, as Bill did here at his example. And I got about 8 names on that sheet of paper. And I reached over and got another sheet of paper. And I got about 8 names on it. And I got another sheet of paper. And I got 8 names on. I got another sheet of paper. And I got up to about 152 of them. I said, man, you mattered and held at everything. I did not know that. You can only see one resentment at a time in your head. And I don't think any of us will ever see how many resentments we have, how much they control and dominate our thinking, and we'll take them all down on a sheet of paper and see them in their entirety for the first time. Now I've made a decision to let God direct my thinking. And if I've got that many resentments, then those resentments are directed my thinking and God can't, and it's just that simple. So I learned something good just by filling out the first column.
Top to bottom, one name at a time, leaving a space between each name or each principle or each institution. Very, very simple.
Now let's look at the second instruction.
So we asked ourselves why we were angry.
Period.
We stop right there. And we look into the second column. And beside each name, he's upset with Mr. Brown, Miss Jones, the employer, and the wife. And beside the name of Mr. Brown, we write down the cause. Why are we angry at Mr. Brown? Now, we don't have to write a long dissertation. If you'll notice there that he only uses 4 or 5 words to describe the cause. That's all. Very simple. Simplicity is the key. He's mad at Mr. Brown. Well, why? Well, his attention to my wife. Told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get my job at the office. Now, I don't even know Mr. Brown. I'm getting mad at him already myself. And you would be too if he done that to you. Well, he's mad at Miss Jones. Well, why? Well, she's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend, and she's a gossip. Put my best friend in a nut house or a treatment center is what she did. And now she's going around telling everybody about it. And she snubbed me. See? Put his best friend in the nut house. He's really upset with his employer. Well, why? Well, he's unreasonable and unjust and overbearing.
Probably said, Bill, by the way, where were you all day Monday anyhow?
Yeah. Threatens to fire me for my drinking and padding my expense account.
Now, that's unreasonable as hell, isn't it?
He's a narrow-minded guy. I don't understand why he'd be upset about that. Now, he's really upset with his wife. Well, why? Well, she misunderstands and nags, and she likes old Brown, and she wants the house put in her name.
Uh-oh.
Now, you start tying all that together like an old Brown wanting the house put in her name, it's time to be getting upset with something. And again, simplicity is the key. Simplicity. 4 or 5 words describing the cause. You don't have to write sheet after sheet after sheet, just 4 or 5 words. And truthfully, I've come to think that those little 4 or 5 words are just notes to myself to remind me to talk about it when I do step 5. Just little notes to me to remind me. Isn't that something? Very simple. Very, very simple.
I began to notice something as I filled out the second column. I began to realize that it's really not them I'm mad at. It's what they've done to me that's got me mad. I could take Mr. Brown out of here and put Mr. Green in. I'd be just as mad at Green if he does the same thing. I could take Miss Jones out and put Mrs. Smith in. I'd be just as mad at Smith as I am Jones if she did the same thing. I could take my wife out of here and put my mistress in, and I'll be just as upset with her as I would be with my wife if she does the same thing. I begin to realize it's not them that's got me upset. It's what they've done to me that's got me upset. Now, the reason that's important for me to begin to realize that is this. I'm getting ready to start out on a lifetime-changing job. And I'm going to try to develop the best possible relationship that I can with the world and everybody in it so I can have maximum peace of mind, serenity, and happiness. Now, part of that relationship is later on. I'm going to have to ask people to forgive me for what I've done to them. By the same token, I'm going to have to forgive others for what they've done to me. And part of that forgiveness starts right here in column 2. When I begin to see it's really not them. It's what they've done that's got me upset. Very valuable information. That starts getting names out of the way. And now then I'm concentrating on more what they did rather than who they are. Valuable information. Now let's look at the third instruction.
In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened, so we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal sex relations which had been interfered with? See, Bill used those same words as he used in the 12 and 12 when he talked about the basic instincts of life. Only in the big book, he didn't explain what the meaning of those words. And I didn't understand the meaning of those words either, so I looked at step 3 for the first time. It was column 3, and I'm confused. I don't even know what he's talking about. But after we went over this basic instincts of life today and got a working knowledge of some of those words that Charlie gave us earlier from the 12 and 12, I have a better understanding of the third column. And that third column is what really threw me, as it throws most people, I believe, because we just don't understand what he means by those things.
it would be impossible for me to get upset with you unless you've done something to threaten one of my basic instincts of life. If you threaten my social instinct in any way, self-esteem, prestige, whatever, plans for the future, etc., then you upset me. If you threaten my security, even either material or emotional security, you upset me. If you threaten my sex life, that is acceptable by society standards, or maybe that sex life that I might have hidden somewhere. If you threaten either one in any way, you upset me. So if I'm mad at you, then one of these basic instincts of life has been threatened. So in column 3, I just simply start listing the part of self that has been affected by this thing you did to me. For instance, Bill's mad at Mr. Brown because of his attention to my wife. Well, certainly that's a threat to his sex relations. Because if she gets to fooling around with old Brown and finds out he's better than Bill is, she may cut him off at home. It's a threat to his self-esteem. If my wife gets to fooling around with Brown and it becomes common neighborhood gossip, my God, what are people going to think about me now? He's mad at Brown because he told my wife of my mistress. Now, boy, that's a threat to sex relations. As soon as the wife found out about it, she cuts him off at home. And then she went over and beat the hell out of the mistress, and he's cut off over there too. No sex relations at all. It's a threat to his self-esteem. Here I am living in a neighborhood, going to work every day, paying my taxes like a citizen should, supporting my wife and children, taking the Boy Scouts out on Saturday afternoon, teaching Sunday school on Sunday morning, and all of a sudden this little story about me and my wife and Brown and my mistress has now become neighborhood gossip. Now, if you don't think that's a threat to self-esteem, you ask Jimmy Baker, he'll tell you in a hurry what it is. You ask that fellow that used to be up there in Washington, D.C. not too long ago, he'll tell you in a hurry what that does to self-esteem. He's mad at Brown because he might get my job at the office. Now, that's a threat to security. If he undercuts me and takes my job away from me, it's also a threat to my self-esteem. What are people going to think about me if Brown undercuts me and takes my job away from me, blah, 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 blah. Very carefully, by the side of each one of these, we put down the part of self that is affected. I think you'll probably notice that at least one part of self is really going to stand out. If I find myself putting down self-esteem, 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 I begin to see that I've got a real problem with self-esteem. If I'm putting down security, 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 maybe my major problem is in the security area. If I keep putting down sex, 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 probably it's going to be in the sex area. It's going to be a combination of all three. But at least one part of self is going to stand out and show me the part of self that I'm really, really having a problem with. I learned something else very valuable in the third column. For the first time in my life, I could see where anger comes from. I've always had a problem with anger. I've always acted and reacted in anger and hurt people. And then I'd be ashamed of it, and I'd say, I'll not do that again. And turn right around and get angry and hurt somebody else the same damn way. You can't do anything about a problem till you understand the problem. I never knew where anger comes from. Therefore, I thought it was just one of those feelings that flitted into your mind that you could do nothing about it to control it or handle it or take care of it. Today I realize where it comes from. It comes from a threat to one of my basic instincts of life. I can't get angry unless one or more of those basic instincts have been threatened. And now that I know where it comes from, maybe with God's help, I can do something about it. Let me give you an example. I'm married to a lady that if there's any such thing as a black belt Al-Anon, she is. She's been in Al-Anon now for 38 years. Got a great program. But Al-Anons get sick in self once in a while too. Now, they don't like to admit it, but they do. And sometimes she'll do something based on self-will, which creates a problem for me. And when she does, it hurts when she does that. But I have learned through my program and through to handle this anger, I'm able to say, well, the poor old thing, they're sick just like we are, and they can't help it any more than we can, and it'll just slide off of my back. I go on through the day, and everything's great. Now, 30 days from now, the same lady does the same thing. And this time my relationship with God's not quite right. My instincts are not quite under control. And I react with anger. And I romp and I stomp and I raise hell with Barbara and everybody around me all day long. Same lady did the same thing. But I choose to react to it in an entirely different manner based on my relationship with God and whether my instincts are under control or not. Oh, I'm glad I've learned that. Because you see, I can't do anything about Barbara. I can't do anything about what any other human being on earth does. But I can do something about my reaction to it with God's help, and I don't have to get angry. And if I don't get angry, I'm in much less chance of drinking than I would be otherwise. Valuable information. I've learned 3 things now from filling out these columns. I've learned first in column 1 how resentful I really am and how much that blocks me off from God. Column 2, I've learned it's not them I resent, it's what they've done to me. Column 3, I've learned that it's really not even what they've done to me. It's based upon how I choose to react to those things, which is going to determine whether I end up angry, resentful, and blocked off from God or not. 3 valuable things. Now we're going to put a couple up here on the screen just to show you how simple this really is. We'll take 1 or 2 from my inventory and 1 or so from Joe's. Not going to do our whole inventory with you, but we'll do a little bit. The first name on my resentment sheet was this lady named Barbara. About 36, 37, 38 years ago, I hated this woman with a purple passion. If there's any way that I could have killed her and got by with it and not have to go to the pen, I really believe I would have killed her. I used to lay awake at night and fantasize. Now, tomorrow morning, on her way to work, and I always believed in her being self-supporting through her own contributions, I think tomorrow morning on her way to work now, she's going to get run over by a big semi-truck. And it's not going to be just a regular trucking company. It's going to be a very affluent trucking company. And they're going to kill her, and I'm going to sue them, and I'm going to end up getting rid of her and getting a couple $1 million at the same time. You Al-Anons are not the only ones that fantasize. We alcoholics did it too. Second name on my list was the Internal Revenue Service. If you want to see a guy come unglued, you just mention the Internal Revenue Service in my presence. I immediately started cussing and raising hell and frothing at the mouth and just become completely unglued. I hated those people with a purple passion. Joe, who was the first one on your list?
Name was Rose.
Name was Rose. Now, who's Rose? Rose was number 1. She's one of the 2 that he married and divorced 7 times, old Rose. Okay? Now that's how simple column 1 is. Just making a list of those names. Now we go to column 2. Why am I so upset with Barbara? What's the cause of the anger? Well, this woman had the audacity to file for divorce 3 times the last year before she went to Al-Anon, spending more money on divorces than I was spending on booze and everything that went with it. Embarrassed the hell out of me. And my God, I had it in for her. I'll guarantee you that. Why? Now, there may be other causes. In this case, I'm just using that one. Internal Revenue Service. Why am I so upset with them? Well, they're trying to put me in jail. That's why I'm upset with them. I don't want anything to do with that bunch of idiots in that Internal Revenue Service trying to put me in jail. Joe, how come you so upset with Rose?
She had an affair with another man.
Had an affair with another man.
For all I've done to her.
Did you all hear that last statement? Had an affair with another man. Joe was really upset with her. That's how simple column 2 is. Now, there may be one cause or there may be multiple causes. 1, 2, 3, could even be 4 or 5 with a name. We're just using one for each one of these. Column 2 is very simple. Now go to the third column. Which part of self is affected by Barbara filing for divorce 3 times within 1 year? Is that a threat to my self-esteem? Oh, yeah. What are the neighbors going to think now? This woman's filed for divorce 3 times and I'm still living with her? They're going to think I'm a weak, yellow-livered little guy. Started to say something else and I thought I better not. Barbara filing for divorce. Is that a threat to my personal relationships? Oh, yeah. She's going to take the kids and she'll either leave or they'll throw me out, one of the two. I'll have no relations with her or with my kids. Barbara filing for divorce, is that a threat to my security? Oh, yeah. By the time the lawyers get through with this deal, she'll have it all. What little bit there is left, she'll get every penny of it. I'll be completely broke. Barbara filing for divorce, is that a threat to my sex life? Well, yeah, she probably won't let me have any after we get a divorce. I had a hard time getting her to let me have any before we got married, much less after we get a divorce. Internal Revenue Service trying to put me in jail. Is that a threat to my self-esteem? Yeah, what are people going to think about me if that happens? A threat to my personal relationships? Certainly, my wife and children are not going to be able to have anything to do with me if I'm in jail. Is it a threat to my security? Oh, yeah. By the time they get through with their fines and everything, they'll have it all, what little's left. Is it a threat to my sex life? The kind I'd like to have, yeah, there may be some in there I don't want. But Old Rose having an affair with another man. Now, is that a threat to Joe's self-esteem? Sure, not even man enough to keep his own wife at home. She's out there fooling around with somebody else. He must really be a weak guy. I never look to see what he's written up there on. I just don't want to see it. Rose having an affair with another man. Is that a threat to his personal relationships? Why, certainly it is. Is it a threat to his security? Well, hell yeah, he's going to have to go to work now. She's been supporting him for the last 10 years. I never know what he's going to write, so I just don't know. Is it a threat to his sex life? Why, sure it is. She's out there having an affair with another man. She's not going to fool with him anymore. It's just that simple. It's not difficult at all to fill out these 3 columns. Okay. We've got the 3 columns filled out. Now let's see what we do with that information. Let's go to the bottom of page 65.
He said, we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was this world and its people were often quite wrong. Well, I knew that all along. And to conclude that others was wrong as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore ourselves. The more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. Now, it's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours which might have been worthwhile.
I read that last statement, and I stopped. And I tried to look back in my life and see how much time I've squandered in resentments. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I know when I've got a good resentment churning around in my head, I'm pretty well paralyzed from doing anything worthwhile. And one of my favorite things that I used to do when I was drinking was get up early in the morning, have a drink of whiskey and a cup of coffee, and turn on my resentment replay machine and replay what she did to me yesterday and replay what he did to me last week and replay what that damn neighbor said to me 3 months ago and replay what that damn policeman did to me 6 months ago and replay what that boss did to me 5 years ago and replay what that uncle did to me 10 years ago. And replay. And it took me just about an hour to run through that tape. And I loved every moment of it. And when that tape would run out, I'd have another drink of whiskey and another cup of coffee. And I'd turn on my get even machine. Now, by God, the next time she does that, I'm going to do this and she's going to do that, and whacko, I'm going to put it on her. They're not going to treat me that way. And it took me just about an hour to get even with all those damn people, and I loved every moment of it. I have spent literally thousands and thousands and thousands of hours in resentments. And as I look at them today, I can't see where they ever did me any good whatsoever. They sure never made me feel better. They just made me feel worse. They never made me any money. They never straightened up a relationship with another human being. They just made things worse and worse and worse and worse. And as far as I can tell, they were absolute, complete, wasted time. Now, when I came to AA, I found out I was doing the same thing. I was getting up in the morning and having a cup of coffee. No whiskey, but a cup of coffee. And turn on my resentment machine. Run it for about an hour, and then have another cup of coffee and turn on my get even machine. I was squandering just as much time in resentments in sobriety as I was when I was drinking. Now today I'm convinced that as a human being here on earth, each one of us probably has a certain allotted time that we're going to live. And I'm beginning to approach the end of mine. And for the first time in my life, I am sober, and I am peaceful, and I am happy, and I'm free, and I've got serenity and peace of mind and happiness. And I love every moment of it. I didn't know you could live the way I'm living today. I didn't know that you could be sober and feel as good as I feel today. And what little time I've got left, I want to enjoy every day that I've got left. I'm not going to let resentments rob me from the sunshine of the Spirit any longer, because I've found out how not to do that. They are an absolute, complete waste of time. But that's not the worst thing. Here's the worst thing about a resentment.
With the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns when we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die.
There's the worst thing about a resentment. When we got a good resentment churning around in our head, we're blocked off from the sunlight of the Spirit. And we don't feel good. And we alkies are going to feel bad just so long. And we're going to start seeking relief. And we'll never forget the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. Next thing you know, we end up thinking it's okay to drink. And we end up drunk all over again, and for us to drink is to die. I really believe that resentment is the number one offender. I think I've seen more people get drunk in AA over resentments than I have any other way. They get upset with a group. They get upset with somebody in a meeting. And rather than do something about it, they just keep letting it fester and fester and fester. And after a while, they're blocked off from their fellow AA people. They're blocked off from God. And they end up getting drunk all over it. I've seen it happen over and over and over and over again. It really is the number one offender. Now listen to our book. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics these things are poison. We turn back to the list. Now this is why you got to have a written inventory. If you took a mental inventory, it'd already be gone. You couldn't turn back to it. We turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. Always before, I looked at a resentment to see what those suckers had done to me. Today, I'll look at a resentment to see what that resentment is going to do to me. And if it's going to block me off from God, and it's going to cause me to get drunk, then whoever and whatever I'm resenting are controlling whether I stay sober or whether I get drunk. And when I saw that, I said to myself, Charlie, man, how dumb can you be? All my life I've been proud of the fact that I stand on my own 2 feet. Nobody tells me what to do. I don't need your advice, thank you. And I suddenly realized that other people have controlled and dominated my thinking through my resentments as far back as I can remember. Hell, I always thought I had it. I never had it. I always reacted to them through my resentments toward them, and they control the way I think. And if they control the way I think, they control the way I act, and I've given them the power to actually control my life for me. And then I said, man, you really are stupid. Because some of these people have been dead and buried for years. Reaching out from the grave and had me by the yang-yang as far back as I can remember. And when I saw the truth behind those resentments, I said to myself, I'm not going to let those people live in my head rent-free any longer. I made a decision to let God direct my thinking. And if other people direct it through my resentments toward them, alive or dead, then God can't. And one of the greatest things I've ever had happened to me. Oh, God, these resentments look good in your head. But you get them on paper and see the real truth behind them. And you see the stupidity of letting other people control the way you think and the way you act. That looks so damn dumb, we just can't stand it. And we alcoholics fancy ourselves as reasonably intelligent people. And I think we are. I don't think we're smarter than others, but we're reasonably intelligent people, and we don't like to look dumb. And when I saw how dumb it was to let those people control me, about 95% of those resentments just automatically begin to disappear because they are so damn stupid. But if you're like I am, you may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 embedded so deeply for so long that even though you see the truth behind them, even though you see the stupidity behind them, they still may not want to leave your mind. And when that happens, we're going to have some extra help. We now come to the first prayer in step 4 in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. We hear always about the step 3 prayer. We hear about the step 7 prayer. We never hear about the prayer spread throughout the entire book. Here's one in step 4, Joe.
He said, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. You can't heal a sick mind with a sick mind. You've got to have God's help. Well, this was our course. We realized that the people who had wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. The first part of the prayer. First of all, we're going to pray for ourselves. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, well, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. See, prayer always changes things, changes people, and people change things. I've been sober 3 or 4 months. I went to Apache, Oklahoma. You can't get there from here. I need an Indian guide and a search warrant to get to Apache, Oklahoma. But I went to a little AA conference out there. And there was a lady talking there down. Her name was Alabama Carruthers. And Alabama was in North Hollywood, California. And I just loved Alabama. If you met her, you'd love her too. She was so excited about life in AA. She just loved AA, and she was excited about life. And she was about 62 years old at that time. And I'd hate to see her when she was 25, I'll tell you that. But I just loved Alabama. She said 2 things that night. This just went off in my head like a thunderbolt. One thing she said, I had a soul sickness. And I was sitting on the bar stool with my last night of drinking. And I felt like the whole insides of me were just going to drop out on the floor. A soul sickness. Finally heard a word, a phrase that would describe the cause or the feeling. Another thing she said was, I've got peace of mind tonight. And that went off in my head, peace of mind. My God, I haven't had peace of mind. I can't remember when I had peace of mind. As I said, my dad was a drinker and it affected me. It's a family illness. And I was affected by it, didn't have any peace of mind. And I wanted to know how she got peace of mind. And after the meeting was over, we were sitting in the lobby of this old hotel, and about 3 o'clock in the morning. And everybody had gone to bed except for George, and he was laying over in her lap.
Sound asleep.
Sound asleep, you'd have to know George. He'd lay in your lap too if you let him. She was rubbing his hair, and we were talking. And I said, Alabama, you said you had peace of mind tonight. How did you get peace of mind? And she said, well, Joe, tell me what was going on in your mind. Now, I'd never done that before. As I told you, I used to drink and go places. And I didn't return right away either. And when I did come home, it was just like I went to the store to get a loaf of bread. The way I felt about it. Well, this particular time, I'd been gone about 3 months. And I was sitting in that's the way I was. And I was sitting in the bar one night, and I got to thinking. Now, you know, either drink or think, but don't get the 2 of them mixed up. Well, I got to drinking, and I started thinking. Well, old Rose hadn't seen me in about 3 months, and I bet she's lonely. Wouldn't you be lonely if you hadn't seen me in about 3 months? So I said, I think I'll go home and visit. Anybody here know what I mean by going home to visit? Okay. So I'm going over to my house to visit. And I got over there and I knocked on the door, and she kind of peeked out the door a little bit. Well, what I did, I just broke right in there is what I did. And I got in my house, and there's sitting an old boy in my recliner, watching my TV in my house, and I'm making payments on all that. Well, what are you going to do? Well, I did. I jumped on that old boy, and he'd like to beat me to death on my own living room floor, and threw me physically out in the yard and told me not to ever come back. Boy, you think I didn't live on that one for a long time. She filed for divorce, and we go through that again. And later on, I was to start thinking real good. And that's when I met my second wife, Phyllis. I looked all over the bars to find a good wife. But I liked Phyllis. She drank the way I did, and she did a lot of things that I was doing. I liked her. That's another story which I'll tell you later. But anyhow, Alabama says, do you think about that a lot? I said, my mind races all the time thinking about it. And she said, Joe, you're just full of resentments. And I said, well, what is a resentment? And she told me what a resentment was that we have tonight. And she had to explain it to me it took a couple hours for me to understand what she was talking about. And finally I said, well, is there any solution for this? And she said, yes, there is. It happens to be. Now, Alabama, you'd have to know Alabama, but she had a purse about that big, about that tall. And in it, she dug around, you know how they are. She dug around in there for a long time, and she finally found this big book in there. Like to have never found it. And she pulled that big book out, and she said, Joe, on page 551 is a story of a lady who was full of deep-seated resentment like you have. And she did certain things, and she said, I read this and done what she did, and if you'll read this and do what she did, you'll probably help you too.
Let's go to page 551, third paragraph.
It's the same on the fourth edition, I think it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And on the third paragraph, she said, I've had many spiritual experiences since I've been in the program. Many that I didn't recognize right away, for I'm slow to learn, and they take many guises. But one was so outstanding that I like to pass it on whenever I can, and I hope it'll help someone else as it helped me. As I said earlier, self-pity, resentment were my constant companions, and my inventory began to look like a 33-year diary, for I seemed to have a resentment against everybody I'd ever known. All but one responded to the treatment suggested in the steps immediately. But this one posed a problem. It was against my mother, and it was 25 years old. I had fed it, fanned it, nurtured it as one might a delicate child. It has been much a part of my breathing. It had provided me with my excuses for lack of education, my marital failures, personal failures, inadequacies, and of course my alcoholism. And though I really thought I would have been willing to part with it, now I knew I was reluctant to let it go. If it done all that thing to me, I'd be reluctant to let it go too, provide me with all those excuses.
She loved this resentment.
Yeah. One morning, however, I realized I had to get rid of it when my reprieve was running out. And if I didn't get rid of it, I was going to get drunk, and I didn't want to get drunk anymore. In my prayers that morning, I asked God to point out to me some way to be free of this resentment. During the day, a friend of mine brought some magazines to take to a hospital group I was interested in. And I looked through them, and a banner across the front of one featured an article by a prominent clergyman in which I caught the word resentment. And here it is. He said, in effect, if you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free. Even when you don't really want it for them and your prayers are only words and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyway. Do it every day for 2 weeks and you'll find you've come to mean it and want it for them. And you will realize that where you used to feel bitterness, resentment, and hatred, you now feel compassion, understanding, and love. Well, I went home after that little conference and got in bed that night, and sure enough, my old mind started running again. And I said, I think I'll pray for those people. And I prayed for them just like she suggested. Added a few names to the list. The next morning I got up and I said, I think I'll pray for those people. And I prayed for those people again. Throughout the day, every time I could think about it, I would pray for those people, asking God to give to them the things that I wanted, such as peace of mind and serenity and happiness. I did that for 2 weeks or maybe more, I don't know how long. Seemed like I was in constant prayer all the time. But one spring morning, we had a cold winter that winter, and one spring morning, it was a beautiful, beautiful, bright, sunshiny day. I'm driving along a place at 31st and Lewis, a beautiful area in Tulsa, and I got stuck in a traffic light, just the length of a traffic light. And I looked over at that pretty house over there, and those tulips were in full bloom, and they were red and yellow, gobs of them, just beautiful. And then a little bit later I looked, and grass was green. It was the greenest green I have ever seen in my life. The birds were singing, and the little squirrels were jumping through the trees, and the trees were blooming out. It was one of those beautiful, beautiful spring mornings that we love so well. And then the thought came to me was this: Joe, how long has it been since you'd seen those things? And I realized then that I don't think I'd ever seen those things up until that morning. I had seen everything in black and white. There was no color in my life. And that's the morning that I knew that this program was working for me. And from that day to this, I wanted everything this program has to offer, because I took some action and I got some results. Now, those people didn't change, but my thoughts and my feelings toward them did change. You see, when this book talks about being cut off from the sunlight of the Spirit, I know what that means. I mean, I really do know what that means. And I don't ever want to go back to there again. Not a good place.
If you've got a resentment that you don't want to get rid of, for God's sake, don't pray about it. Because if you do, you're going to get rid of it. I had one of those, and this one was against another man. Another one of those that I might have put away if I'd have had a chance to do so. And when I come to AA, I did something about all my resentments except this one. And this was one of those carry to the grave kind. I didn't intend to ever get rid of it. And finally it began to bug me. And I went to my sponsor and told him about it. He said, "Oh, Charlie, you've got to get rid of that resentment." I said, "I don't want to get rid of this resentment." He said, "That's beside the point. If you don't, it's going to kill you." I said, "Okay, how am I going to do that?" And it's like Alabama did with Joe. He took me back there in that story in the back of the book, and he said, "Read this, and then go home and do what it says." And I read it, and I went home, and I got down on my knees, which I didn't do very often in those days. And I said, "God, I want you to give that son of a bitch everything he deserves." And that's the only prayer I had for him that day. The next day I prayed. 2 or 3 or 4 days later, I found myself saying something I really didn't intend to say. I found myself saying, "God, give him in his life what I want for mine. Give him the same peace of mind, serenity, and happiness that I seek for myself." 3 or 4 or 5, 6 days later, I don't know how long, continuing to pray for him, and I woke up one morning, and that resentment was completely gone. Never to return. And the irony in the situation is it wasn't 30 to 60 days later. This guy moved in as my next door neighbor. Yeah, and we were allowed to visit back and forth in each other's homes, and we became good friends once again. This thing really does work.
See, I used to want to get even with people. Anybody here want to get even with people? Well, let me tell you how to get even with people, is you pray for them. And when you pray for them, then you're even. You see? And then